Hi everyone, welcome back to Evermore YouTube channel. It's Chris back with my rant stroke thought of the day. And wow, another massive, mad, crazy, nuts 24 hours in the world of Newcastle United. So we played Espanyol in a pre-season friendly last night. Drew 2s each. I thought we would draw. Some good bits, some not so good bits. I'm going to do a proper post-match analysis on this later on today in a live post-match after Atletico Madrid to cover both games. But the main talking point, really, the main focal point was obviously the fact that we don't really have a centre forward, and it's been so apparent right through pre-season that we don't have a centre forward, and we do have a centre forward. He just doesn't want to play for the club because he's a grumpy bastard and he wants to go to Liverpool. Now, Eddie Howe didn't do a pre-match conference, which I think was a good idea because he would have been asked nothing but Alexander Isak questions. He did do a little bit of a post-match kind of conversation, and again it was all focusing around Alexander Isak, and he had some very, very interesting comments to Eddie Howe. So he basically outed the fact that Alexander Isak is not injured, so he is fit to play, but he says at the moment he can't be involved with the group, he can't select them for games, and he said he'd absolutely love Alexander Isak to be playing for Newcastle tonight, and he'd love him to be training tomorrow, but at the minute that's not possible. And he also said he won't be involved in the game at Aston Villa next week, which is the first game of the Premier League season. Now, people have looked at this two different ways. So Keith Downey's take on this particular one was that the player's on strike, he's trying to force a move, he doesn't want to play, he's threw his toys out the pram, all that kind of stuff. The other side of it is Craig Hope's side, which again is that Alexander Isak doesn't want to play for the club. He's not gone on strike, he's just been told he can't be part of the group. I thought it was really interesting Eddie Howe had talked about the group, because I think the group are pissed off for them, and I've said this before. I think certainly the likes of Bruno Guimaraes, the club captain, Joe Linton, those players will be fucking pissed off with Alexander Isak's actions and the way he's behaved. So a lot of other people, Dan Burn, I bet you as well, Geordie boy Dan Burn. You know, Trippier came out and kind of supported him a little bit in the press, but make no mistake about it, behind closed doors, Trippier will be fucking raging at the way he's behaved, because Trippier is a captain and he won't like that kind of attitude and behaviour either. Now, you know, taking the emotion out of it, stop and look at it as a Newcastle fan, right? You can understand why Alexander Isak maybe wants to leave, right? He's one of the best centre-forwards in the world. Liverpool want him. He'll win more trophies there than he'll win with Newcastle. There's no doubt about that. You know, he could win the Champions League, not just play in the Champions League, right? If he just turned around and said at the end of the season that he wanted to move on, that he felt like he's done everything he can do at Newcastle and this opportunity's too good to pass up, and he did it the right way, you know, he kept his head down. He was respectful to Eddie Howe, to the team, to the fans, to the club. Most Newcastle fans wouldn't have begrudged him moving on. We would have been sad to see such a good player leave, but we wouldn't have begrudged him moving on, because that's football for you. But the way he's gone about it is absolutely vile and disgraceful. It really, really is. It's so disrespectful, it's so petulant, so arrogant. And, you know, you're seeing stories now coming out in the press that Luke Edwards in the Telegraph is saying that apparently the owners, the PIF, have actually said as an act of defiance that he is not going to Liverpool and he will not play for the football club again until he gets his head right, and he's not going to Liverpool. So we're in a really tricky situation right here. Now, what do Newcastle need to do in this situation? I think it's become a little bit toxic in the dressing room for Alexander Isak to be involved in the training and in the dressing room. I think until the window closes and Alexander Isak is either still a Newcastle player or he's not a Newcastle player, I don't think the group want him involved. Now, that's very, very dangerous, because he is such a good player to not have involved in your squad. But what Newcastle United need to do is sign the players to replace him and then move him on, in my opinion. I kind of admire if the PIF have turned around and said, fuck off Liverpool, you're not getting him. I kind of respect that, because it's been something I've wanted him to do for a long time. But you know, there's no point in keeping a player there who's going to be toxic to the dressing room and not bother trying, you know, despite how good he is in terms of his ability. I mean, I was watching Paul Toon review and he made a really good point about this. Alexander Isak can probably play shit for the entire season and still get in the Swedish World Cup squad. So the threat of losing his World Cup squad place in Sweden's not really going to work for that, you know, that regard. Obviously, professionalism and his integrity and still keeping his reputation there, playing on his arrogance and his ego, he would eventually have to knuckle down and get out of it. Much like he did last season. It's all come out in the wash now that Amanda and Murd had offered him this great contract and he didn't take, you know, we didn't give him it, and Mitchell came in and told him to fuck off, basically. And that's why he was a grumpy bollocks for the start of the season and didn't score for ages. So you don't want that Isak in your squad. So what Newcastle have to do is focus on signing players to replace what he could do and then sell him for the right fee. You know, and I'd still chin Liverpool for a player plus cash deal. If Liverpool are willing to come back with, say, 130 million quid or 120 million quid or something like that, chuck in a Harvey Elliott or something like that to give us extra bodies in midfield. Because looking at that game again the other night, you know, the depth in midfield is so thin, so threadbare. And I don't know if we're going to get a midfielder in. All the players that have been linked this summer, none of them are midfielders, which is weird. So we've got rid of Sean Longstaff. Joe Willock is injured again and also shit and has regressed so badly over the last 2 years. We should definitely be moving him on. Alfie Harrison's got energy, but lacks a touch, lacks a kind of footballing brain as well. Lewis Miley looks great in pre-season. Probably him and Song Soo are the only bright sparks, I would say, of the pre-season thus far. But the midfield depth is really, really worrying, because if Bruno, Tonali or Joe Linton get injured or suspended or both, which could very well happen with those three, we're only relying on Lewis Miley and there's nobody really underneath that. So that's a real worry. But going back to the main topic of this conversation, the centre-forward position. Wiese looks like it could happen. Brentford are about to sign a centre-forward as well by the looks of it. So Wiese at Newcastle this week could happen. But, you know, what do we do with the situation with Alexander Isak? There's been links to Samu at Porto, who I think is a fantastic player, raw, but very much pace and power, movement, would give us an element of play similar to Isak, but not the technique that Isak's got, but the power, the pace, the ability to disrupt teams, his link-up play, that kind of stuff. I think he would be an excellent signing, but they want something like £89 million or £85 million release clause. So Newcastle have got a big decision to make there. Or do they get a Wiese in for, say, 40 million, and then get Ollie Watkins for 60 million. There's 100 million spent on two players. I know you might be shouting at me going, oh, Chris, they're 29, 28, whatever. But you know what? They're both 15 to 20 goal a season Premier League players. Watkins would be brilliant on our side. His movement, his pace, his finishing, his ability. I think he would fit into this Newcastle team like a hand in a glove. He really, really would. I think he'd be absolutely perfect. And Wiese again can play across the front three and give you that goal threat as well. So if you were to bring in Wiese and Watkins and fuck Isak off and get rid of that toxicity, I think we're in better shape for the season. Because what worries me about the Isak situation is the longer this toxicity goes on behind the scenes, the more it impacts the team morale and throws the mindset off for getting ready for a really difficult season ahead. And we don't need this. And Isak's really fucked us this summer by behaving like that. I feel really sorry for Eddie Howe, because once again, he's put in the limelight. He's put in a really difficult situation. I'll tell you something, and I don't want to get rid of Eddie Howe, right? But England manager in waiting, you bet your arse. I mean, England managers' jobs are so difficult, having to deal with the questions around players and press and all that stuff. Look how well Eddie Howe's handled this shitstorm. You know, his articulation, his intelligence, his rhetoric, the way he handles himself. He's been absolutely superb, but there's nobody there to support him, and that needs to stop and that needs to change, because Eddie Howe needs that support. He needs somebody else to take the heat away from him on a regular basis. I don't think that person will come in until the window closes, and I kind of get that, because why would you as a director of football or a CEO want to be labelled with this shit window on your doorstep when you've had nothing to do with it? So I kind of understand their positions. I'd probably do the same if I was them too, but the club should have maybe given them a little bit more cash and got them in early to try and sort the deals out that we've lost over the summer. And again, with the Isak thing, I still think that if Isak had been more honest at the start of the window, then maybe we could have got Liam Delap. Maybe his decision is different than going to Chelsea. If he thinks he's going to be the main man and the number 9 at Newcastle and lead the line week in, week out, maybe he makes a different decision than going to Chelsea. And that's the reason why Isak and his people have fucked us this summer. Now, loads of different variations of this. Isak and his people told Newcastle that they wanted to go, and Newcastle didn't do anything about it and didn't respond to it well and all that kind of stuff, right? But surely if Isak was going to leave and going to go, and they knew he was going to go, they would have told people like Liam Delap that, and Liam Delap may have made a different decision. He may have came to Newcastle. He may not have done, but he may have done, is the question that I'm posting there really in terms of that situation. But it is casting a huge dark cloud over Newcastle's preparations for the season. I think it's thrown us all off for the pre-season. I think that's why we've been a little bit all over the place. You know, there has been some bright spots, as I say, Lewis Miley and Song Soo in particular, over the last few games looking really, really good. You know, but the situation with Isak is this, is he's still a Newcastle player. Liverpool haven't put the money up for him. We haven't signed the replacements. Villa's coming next weekend. And at the minute, Anthony Gordon's going to be the centre forward, I say, because Will Asula is nowhere near ready for it. But just another quiet day in the world of Newcastle United, I suppose. But let us know in the comments below what you guys think about the situation with Isak. Is there a way back from, or do Newcastle just need to get the the 2 bodies into replacement, fuck them off down the M62, as I've said before. I'll drive them, fuck it. I'll have to stop and charge your motor halfway down, Alexander. You can get the fucking coffees in, son. But they need to get the 2 players in. And they need to make sure that the squad isn't weaker, and they need to extract a decent market value. But if PIF are pissed off and digging their heels in, we could end up with Isak for next season, but he needs to get his shit together and get himself back on board. As I said last summer, he had a fucking wobble. He was shit for the first few games, and then he came to life. If he does that again this season and gets his Champions League, you know, we'll all be forgiven. I don't know. Let us know in the comments below what you guys think. This is a mess. It really, really is. And I hope Newcastle sort this out before the window shuts. But thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. I'll see you later on the live post-match. Have a belter. Cheers.
Heroes celebrate. They have done it.